Shepherdess in the Snow. In the heart of the towering mountains, where the whiteness of snow stretched endlessly, lay a small village called Orlan. Surrounded by dense forests and frozen meadows, the village's wooden cottages stood beneath the weight of thick snow, their chimneys releasing the warm scent of burning firewood. Among these cottages lived a young girl named Layla. Despite her calm features, she was strong and resilient, having grown up amidst the harshness of nature. Since childhood, she had accompanied her father into the mountains, learning the art of shepherding and how to protect the flock. But he had passed away years ago, leaving her with the responsibility of the sheep. From that moment on, the mountains became a part of her. She knew their paths as well as the lines of her palm and found companionship in solitude rather than fear. A journey into the unknown. One morning, Layla awoke to the sound of wind slamming against the walls of her small cottage. The air was crisp, the sky clear, but the scent of an approaching storm lingered. Knowing she had little time before the weather worsened, she quickly packed some fresh bread, goat cheese she had made the previous day, and a flask of warm water. Wrapping herself in her heavy woolen cloak, she grabbed her long shepherd's staff and set out with her flock toward the grazing lands. Upon reaching the lower valley, relief washed over her as she found patches of green grass peeking through the icy ground. The sheep eagerly spread out, grazing. She sat nearby, enjoying the brief moment of peace, listening to the whisper of the cold wind and watching migratory birds fly in search of warmth. But the tranquility did not last long. The storm strikes. The wind howled fiercely, and dark clouds gathered at an alarming speed. Within minutes, the golden morning light faded into a grim gray, and snowflakes began to fall, light at first, then rapidly intensifying into a furious storm. Layla's heart pounded as she saw fear in the eyes of her sheep, which huddled together in confusion. She knew she had to turn back, but with each step, the wind pushed against her, erasing familiar paths beneath a thick white veil. The world around her became a swirling storm of ice and cold, and the roaring wind drowned out every other sound. A shiver of fear ran through her. This was no ordinary storm, it was nature's fury unleashed. A shelter in the storm. Through the blinding snow, Layla spotted a dark shape among the trees. Forcing her way forward through the knee-deep drifts, she reached an old wooden cabin, its walls weathered and its roof laden with heavy snow. With a final push, she shoved the rickety door open and stumbled inside. The cabin was abandoned, its stone fireplace filled with cold ashes, but in one corner lay a small stack of dry firewood. With trembling hands, she lit a fire, feeling warmth creep back into her frozen limbs. She brought her flock inside, wrapped herself in her cloak, and tried to steady her breath. But she was not alone. The encounter with the wolf. As she sat recovering, a strange sound broke through the silence, a faint, broken howl, like a desperate call. Peering through the frost-covered window, her eyes searched the darkness until they settled on a lone figure moving through the storm. A wolf. It was thin, its fur caked with ice, stumbling as though on the verge of collapse. For a moment, fear tightened in her chest. Her father had always warned her about wolves. But this one did not look like a threat, it looked like a dying creature fighting to survive. Cautiously, she opened the door. The wolf turned its weary eyes toward her, filled more with exhaustion than menace. Without thinking, she tore off a piece of her bread and placed it at the doorstep. The wolf did not move. She stepped back, waiting. Slowly, the wolf approached, sniffed the bread, then ate it, his movements sluggish, as if each bite required effort. When he finished, he lifted his head and gazed at her, not like a predator, but like a being who had found an unexpected refuge. Then, without a sound, he retreated to the shadows of the trees, but he did not disappear entirely. The journey home. By dawn, the storm had calmed, and sunlight began piercing through the heavy clouds. It was time to return. As she stepped outside, she was surprised to see the wolf still there, watching her in silence. She hesitated, her path home was buried under layers of fresh snow. She had no clear way back. But before panic could take hold, the wolf moved ahead, walking in a deliberate direction. For a moment, she doubted him. Then, she followed. The wolf led the way through the snow-laden trees with unwavering confidence. She trailed behind, her sheep following closely. Though the terrain was treacherous, she noticed that he chose the safest paths as if guiding her with care. After hours of walking, she spotted the first signs of her village, the rising smoke of a chimney, the faint chime of distant bells. At the forest's edge, the wolf halted. He turned back to her for a brief moment before vanishing into the depths of the trees. Layla stood still, gazing after him, gratitude swelling in her chest. It felt as if nature itself had sent this wolf to guide her home. From that day on, whenever she ventured into the pastures, she would sometimes find fresh paw prints near the village's edge. The wolf never came too close, but she knew he was there, watching, protecting, bound by an unspoken pact. A pact between a girl and a wolf, forged in the heart of a storm, where each had saved the other in the darkest of moments. ### A bond beyond words. The winter in Orlan continued, but something had changed within Layla. Every time she ventured into the mountains, she found herself scanning the landscape for a familiar silhouette. Though the wolf never showed himself outright, she would sometimes spot fresh tracks near the tree line or catch the faintest glimmer of golden eyes watching from the distance. As the weeks passed, an unspoken connection grew between them. Layla would leave scraps of food near the pastures, and they would always be gone by morning. She knew it was him. Her heart told her so. ### A threat looms. One evening, as Layla sat by her fire, a knock at the door startled her. It was Merrick, one of the village hunters, his breath misting in the cold air. "Layla," he said grimly, "there's been sightings of a lone wolf near the village. The elders worry it's dangerous. Some of us are heading out at dawn to track it." Layla's heart clenched. She forced herself to appear indifferent. A lone wolf? In this deep winter? It's probably just searching for food. Maybe. But hungry wolves are unpredictable, Merrick replied. Be careful when you're out with your flock. Layla nodded, closing the door as Merrick left. Panic twisted inside her. She had to find him first. ### A desperate race. At the break of dawn, before the hunters could set out, Layla hurried into the forest, following the tracks she had come to recognize. The morning air was sharp, the snow crunching under her boots as she pushed forward. She found him near a frozen stream, his thin frame barely visible against the white expanse. His golden eyes met hers, calm yet wary. "You have to go," she whispered, kneeling before him. "They're coming for you." The wolf tilted his head, as if he understood. He had trusted her once in the storm. Would he trust her now? She reached into her cloak, pulling out a piece of dried meat and setting it down. "Follow me. I'll lead you away." The wolf hesitated for a moment before stepping forward. Together, they moved swiftly, Layla guiding him toward the deeper part of the forest, far from the hunter's reach. ### The final goodbye. After what felt like hours, they reached the base of the mountain where the trees grew thick and untouched. This was beyond the village's reach. Layla turned to him, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "You'll be safer here." The wolf stepped closer, lowering his head slightly, as if in silent gratitude. Then, with a final glance, he turned and disappeared into the dense woods. Layla stood there for a long time, the cold biting her cheeks.